Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Temple of Possibilities. I am Minister William, or Reverend Will, if you wish, leading today's sermon of February 24th, 2024, February 25th, 2024. And as always, we'll start with a moment of silence for prayer, meditation, or what have you. All right, thank you. This week's sermon is called The King's Painting, and it's on alltimeshortstories.com, as where most of them I find are. It's also called The Perfect Portrait. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom where there lived a king who only had one leg and one eye. But his skill, intelligence, and generosity made him a competent ruler. As a result, the people in his kingdom lived a joyful and healthy life under his rule. Then one day, while the king was walking in his palace, he noticed the portraits of his ancestors along the hallway. The paintings of his ancestors sparked a thought in the king's mind. He thought that his children would walk the same corridor one day and remember all of their ancestors through these portraits. But the king never had his portrait painted because he never thought of getting one. No one ever suggested he get one painted because they were unsure how it would turn out due to his physical abnormalities. The king wanted a portrait of him because he wished his younger generation would remember him when they see his painting. So the king sent an invitation to all the painters from across the kingdom to his court. He announced that he wanted a beautiful portrait made of himself that would be placed in the palace. So any painter who wants to paint his picture should come forward. The painter will be rewarded based on how good the painting will turn out. The painters started to panic and thought about making the king with only one eye and one leg look beautiful. How can his picture be beautiful? It's not possible. They were also scared that the king may get angry and punish them if the portrait didn't turn out beautiful. So one by one, all the painters started to make excuses and politely decline to, to make a painting of the king. But one young painter raised his hand and said that he would make a beautiful portrait of the king and the king would like. The king was finally happy hearing that at least one of the painters was interested in making his painting. The other painters got curious about how this young painter would make a beautiful painting of the king. The king excitedly permitted him, and the painter started drawing the portrait. He then filled the drawing with plants. Finally, after a long wait, he said the picture was ready. All, all the uh, courtiers, and other painters were curious and envious of, about how the painting would turn out. How will the portrait look beautiful with all the physical abnormalities of the king? What if the king doesn't like the art and he gets angry? They curiously waited for the big reveal. Finally, the painter uncovered the painting in front of the court. Everyone in the court, including the king, was left stunned looking at the painting. The young painter had made a portrait in which the king was sitting on the horse with one leg on the one leg side, holding his bow and aiming the arrow with his good eye closed. Indeed, archery and horse riding were few of the skills the king possessed. Nevertheless, the king was delighted to see that the painter made a beautiful portrait by creatively presenting the king's abnormalities. The king adored the picture, and the painter received a generous reward. Indeed, it was a beautiful portrait. How beautiful the world will look if we could ignore others' weaknesses and celebrate their strengths. The world will be more beautiful if you ignore the flaws in others and see their strength. There are too many people who will constantly look at somebody's weakness. They will focus on what somebody can't do or how hard it'll be for them. That they don't ever bother to look at the stuff they can do, the gifts that they possess, and the skills that they possess. In this day and age, it's too easy to look at one's weaknesses instead of one's strengths. But not everyone can be perfect in everything. Everyone has their weaknesses, and everyone has their strengths. And not everyone has the same weaknesses and strengths. And we can't focus on somebody's weaknesses because we'll miss their strengths. And sometimes the person who does that the most is the person themselves. It is so easy for us to see our flaws and totally ignore everything good, all of our strengths. And we need to see our strengths for ourselves, and other people need to see our strengths instead of our weaknesses. Our weaknesses are nothing. If we can't do something ourselves, we need to ask for help. And someone who's has a strength in that subject can help us. But that is all for this week. Remember, when we all come together, the possibilities are endless. And I'll see you next week. Thank you.